Hello and welcome. In today's exciting episode, I partially make this, well, it looks like it's made, but I make this jacket here. It was so difficult.
It's perfect. Perfect, perfect, perfect. Perfect jacket.
I wasn't going to use this fabric this year. I was going to save it for next year, but I recently hit 500,000 views on my YouTube channel. I was like, yay! Challenge time. So I decided I would make a really, really difficult tweed up and challenge myself. So I cut out 2 sets of the netting to use as a structural layer because I'm going to do heavy beading on it. Set aside the lining parts and the sleeves, and with the fronts and the back parts, I sewed them together. So the 3 bits is the back, and there's 2 layers there, and then the front is center front and side front on the left and center front and side front on the right, and you can sort of see that there's 2 bits there. So I sort of pinned that together, machine sewed it, and I was sort of running short of time, so instead of opening up the seam allowance and hand stitching each side down, I did the double layer. And I don't recommend this if you're making a jacket for the first time. It's a little corset-like to do both seams the same way. You end up with a really thick line that's basically like having a corseted bit, but it's fine for the type of jacket that I'm doing, especially since I'm putting so much weight on it with beading. So anyway, when you're using a delicate tweed, or any tweed really, any loosely woven fabric, if you don't know how to get it straight, you put your hands on the diagonals. So top left, bottom right, pull it out, then bottom right, top left, and pull that. And then, with this one, the lines are really obvious, so you can tell if it's straight or not. And then you put your pattern pieces on it. So what I'm doing is I made the structural layer, that netting, and now I'm pinning it to, it's technically called draping the tweed over it. But basically I'm pinning the tweed to the structural layer, to the shell. And as I go, I'm sort of molding it. The downside of doing it this way is that if you want to change the size of your jacket, you can't do it because your whole jacket is in sort of, just in 3 pieces rather than the standard princess seams of, a jacket. A tailored jacket is usually a million different pieces. So if you put on weight or lose weight or something, then you just take in a tiny bit at each seam and it's really easy. So the downside of this style of making a jacket is that you can never do that. But the positive is that you can pattern match to perfection. So yeah, it's just what's going to suit your purpose. So you just carefully pick a point, the point that's a straight line across, you pin that first and then you pin it everything else. Because I have such a small amount of fabric, like I only bought 1 yard of this fabric, I basically pick a line and I pin the bottom of the jacket to it and then mold the top of the back. And then once that's done, I pick the same line, but further down in the repeat of the pattern, and that's the bottom of the front. The center front panels are the ones that have to be straight, so you've pinned them first, and then you do the center side ones because they need to be molded a bit. So yeah, that's how you manage to keep the center front, like, the front left and the front right bits straight. So as you can see, I'm just slowly going along and pinning everything, and I'm not sure why I felt the need to. So yeah, you pin the center front panels first because they're the bits that really need to be straight. And once you've done them, then you do the side ones, and you sort of, once it's pinned, you take out the pins and let the fabric sort of move in a little bit around the bust area so that the sleeve, the armholes and the bust are right. It's as soon as you get the fabric out and you start with your pins, you'll know exactly where the tension is in the fabric and where you have to take out the pins and repin. It's it's just like draping on a mannequin, but kind of slightly harder, I guess. But when I do it this way, it just means that I can use less fabric, which is good because it's very expensive fabric. So it means that I get, in the end, more jackets, but obviously it takes a lot more time if you have less fabric to use. So here we go. I've pinned everything in place and now I have to stitch them together. Normally I just do a few lines and then machine sew, then do all the hand sewing, but this is silk. So the problem with that is you have to use different needles when you're sewing on silk. You have to use beading needles because they're finer and much sharper. The problem is they're sharp at both ends, so they stab your fingers a lot. I know some people like to use thimbles, but yeah, people who sew a lot don't generally. So yeah, I've got sore fingers at the moment, that's all. But it's totally worth it. This fabric is absolutely gorgeous, but it did mean, because it's such a delicate fabric and it falls apart the second that you cut it, it just meant that I had to be really, really careful. And with the neckline, I was really hesitant to cut that section out as well. So as well as sewing every second line of the tweed, I also hand sewed right around the edges. And yeah, it was really, really difficult to work with, but it's just the most beautiful piece. It's absolutely gorgeous. So it was a pain to work with, but I don't know, it's just so beautiful. It was nice to spend time with it. So yeah, so I finished the front and the two fronts and the back eventually. And so here you go. And so there are two things I could have done next. I could have done the sleeves next, or I can make the torso of the jacket. So I decided that making the body of the jacket would be better because I have to touch the tweed less. So I've decided this is the back. I'm going to put the two fronts, front left and front right, on here, pin them at the shoulders, and I'll finish the torso of the jacket or the bodice of the jacket, and then I'll do the sleeves just so that I have to touch the tweed less. So here's not really sure why I'm showing you this. Oh yeah, so because it's so delicate, I ended up doing loads of hand stitching right around the edge, but I've already told you that. And I think it's just because it took so long. I must have forgotten I filmed it. So yeah, here we go. This is the back, and the two fronts, I finally cut them apart. That was a little heart-wrenching. So now I'll just pin them at the top, and then I machine sew them at the shoulders. And then once that was very carefully machine sewed, I had to open up the seam allowance, pin it down, and see, even just moving it, because the neckline is, even though I'd stitched around, it was still really, really delicate. So yeah, I pinned back the seam allowance and then hand stitched it down on both sides. And I know it looks a bit awkward, but yeah, just moving it so that I could film it properly was it's just ridiculously delicate, this tweed. But I knew I was going to put a lot of beading on top of it, so it would be protected from the outside and the inside. So yeah, anyway, so I finally sewed the shoulders together, and then I laid over 2 layers of netting, and this is just going to support the shoulders and make the jacket look smoother. So I hand stitched them into place at the back, the front, and around the shoulders. And again, this sort of helps protect the tweed as well. And yeah, I carefully had to roll the tweed, the fronts and the back up, so that I could just work on the center bit. It was just ridiculously difficult to work on this tweed. It was just unbelievable. So this is me just showing you. I always just turn it over just to check that you can't see any visible hand stitching, because the hand stitching is kind of at an awkward angle. So if you could see any of the stitches, it would look weird and you'd have to like cut it, tie it off and do another stitch, but it's fine. So now that this is done, the next step I have to do is make the front inside panels of the lining. But this tweed is so delicate that I decided not to use this particular tweed as the lining, I'm going to use that teal one over in the corner there. So I made the lining pieces out of that, and here we go. So now, yeah, I guess I'm going to make that tweed into a jacket as well. I was going to save that for next year as well. Anywho, so these are my lining ones, and the structural layer of that is pink because I've run out of the black. So I machine sewed them into place. So now that they're ready, I can do the neckline, but first I'm going to sew the sides together. So I machine sewed the sides of the body of the jacket together, and then I hand stitched the seam allowance back. And then I also machine sewed a little bit of structural layer onto the top of the neckline, machine sew the neckline, then turn that structural layer, the netting, underneath. So it's kind of like doing a facing, and pinned it into place. And now I'm just going to hand stitch around there a couple of times. So now we have a finished neckline for this jacket. Even though it doesn't have lining in it yet, I'm going to make the whole outer jacket, and I did the sleeves as well. And well, the sleeves are done the same way. You hand stitch the fabric to the backing fabric, then you machine sew them together, then you hand do the seam allowance, then you carefully pull them out the correct way. And then I just decided to do some beading because clearly this wasn't difficult enough. Now, originally I was just going to do long bugle beads on this, like the oil slick ones. I only used half of them when I did this blue Chanel, navy blue Chanel. But the navy blue Chanel and the Edinburgh Chanel tweed jacket are from the same collection. So I thought maybe I'll do it the same way. Instead of doing those oil slick bugle beads, I'll do it the same way as the Edinburgh jacket. Well, same concept, but with different beads, obviously. So yeah, I got this mix of beads. I mean, I made them from all my beads. I just got out all the really expensive ones, basically. Normally when you mix beads, you should put in more plastic ones and less super expensive ones, just so that the eye can sort of doesn't get too confused and overstimulated. You're supposed to put some filler beads in there, but I kind of went a little bit overboard with this one. And there's so much crystal cut glass in here, and these are all really, really good quality glass beads. And I also have some fish beads, which are amazing, and some of my little gold beads. They're plastic, but they're gold plated. And I have like 18 dragonfly gold beads. So this is the dragonfly jacket, because I mean there's lots of unique beads in here, but this is literally the only jacket I'm ever going to make that has dragonfly beads on it. So I was like, we'll go with that. So yeah, plus they're so beautiful. So yeah, I did the sleeves first because the sleeves are really difficult to do. I mean, I used a jacket pattern that has a little bit more ease on the sleeves. So it's easier than the Vogue, slightly easier than the Vogue 7975, but still incredibly difficult. But the finished jacket is stronger if you make the jacket then bead it. So yeah, I mean, you can do it this way where you make the torso and you make the sleeves, and then you leave a good distance at the edge of each, and then you can sort of join them. It's like, it's just stronger this way. But I mean, the vast majority of people who make jackets only wear them 3 times. I think it's 4 to 6 times is the average of, people wearing clothes. So, but I wear mine for decades and I wear them a lot. They're like my everyday clothes. So yeah, when I say I have to make it this way, it's because I'm actually going to wear my stuff. So if you're just doing it to, wear it to one event, then, I mean, it doesn't matter if it's going to fall apart. Whereas mine, it really does. So that's why I have to take quite so much care. But I know you could use a more rugged fabric, but this is divine, this fabric. It is just so sublime. And it's just nice to work with something that's incredibly beautiful. Anyway, so now I have put off putting these sleeves in for so long. It's ridiculous. I should have really put them in before I beaded it, but it was just kind of easier to do it this way, sort of, not really. So I set the sleeves, which is just pinning them in and matching up all the notches very carefully. And if you don't get it right the first time, do it again. Just pull everything out and do it again. And then you machine sew it, and then you hand stitch back all the seam allowance, and you sort of push it into the sleeve, and that's what helps give it the nice round shape. I haven't actually done this yet because I had to stop so that I could edit all the footage and narrate it, but that's the next step that I'm going to do. And this is what it looks like so far. So I have sewn the sleeves in, machine sewn them in, but I haven't pinned back the seam allowance. I haven't clipped the curves in and just trimmed down the underarm seam allowance by half. And yeah, so I have to do all those fiddly bits, and then once the seam allowance is stitched down, I will do all this beading around the edge here. And because it's beading up the arm and onto the shoulder of the bodice of the jacket, it's going to strengthen the join of the sleeves. So that's why I left such a big area around the machine sewing bit that I just did. So yeah, and I also haven't done under the arms, but it's looking pretty good. And once I've finally done all the beading, then I'll be able to make the lining and like all the silk parts of the lining and hand stitch them into place. But yeah, it's looking pretty good. I have just spent so much time on this jacket, but it's so completely worth it. It is such a beautiful fabric. I bought it at the start of the pandemic, 2020, and I bought it off Etsy. Oh my God, don't ever buy off Etsy. It's an absolute nightmare. Stuff just doesn't turn up. And Etsy just goes, oh well. And it took 4 months for it to get here. And then I've been holding on to it for years because I was just like, oh no, I don't want to rack it. So yeah, I do have enough beads to finish, but I haven't had time yet. I actually have enough beads to sort of do more, like do not a whole nother layer, but maybe half a layer. There's some really bright beads, so I think I might just go along, and there's some spots that are they look a little bit vacant compared to everything else, so I might use some of them in that. But I've also got these ones here. I picked out some of the more boring ones from the mix because, I kind of went a bit overboard with whenever I make a bead mix, I always put way too many beads in it. So this tweed has teal and brown in it. So I was thinking maybe I'll use them. I also have these teal ones. They're crystal cut glass beads. So I'm thinking maybe them. Who knows? It's I really love that other tweed, and the reason I was holding on to it is because the first tweed that I ever really fell in love with was a teal coloured Chanel tweed jacket, and it was kind of a mix between my gold tweed, my seafoam tulle tweed, and that teal tweed. And when I make the teal jacket, I'll tell you all about it. But yeah, well, the story's kind of obvious. I love tweed. So anyway, this is what the jacket looks like at the moment. Obviously, I'm going to have to turn up the hem and do the cuffs as well, but I have to finish all the beading first. So that's it for this video. Thank you very much for watching. Sorry I didn't film much of the beading, but my fingers were really sore from the sharp needles. And I feel like it would have just been me complaining that it was all very difficult, but totally worth it. And I got to use some gorgeous, beautiful coloured beads on this just majestic fabric. Incredibly difficult to work with, but so completely worth it. I love it. Every now and again, it just takes so long to work with a really expensive, delicate fabric, but so completely worth it. This is why I do it. So yeah, if you've got a really amazing fabric that you've always been a little bit afraid to cut into, I mean, absolutely make a mock-up or 10 mock-ups, whatever it is that you need to do. But then, yeah, do it. Use those amazing unique fabrics that you have. It's so completely worth it. Anyway, thanks again for watching. I really do appreciate it. And yeah, ta-da! My dragonfly jacket. It's so pretty. I love it.